forward, we might have gone for a 50-50 challenge. We might have come to here, into there. But what you say now is position before possession, and I've just blocked you off. And I get in. Yeah?
And he's in the boards.
And he's in the boards in ice hockey.
Okay, welcome back. Eye on the Ball, a further episode. This week we're going to talk about coaching. Two very esteemed guests again, Paul and Mike. Fantastic coaches, long careers, and lots of stories, information, knowledge to impart. Thanks again to Burnley Football Club for allowing us to use the dressing rooms, and Burnley in the community for sponsoring and being a partner on this project of podcasts in terms of football and grassroots education. So today's topic is coaching. Both coach for a lot of years. Paul, I'm going to come to you first. You became a coach at an early age, really. How did that happen?
I suppose it's a real natural process, just because my dad had been a coach, a manager. I was always following him around to football grounds, going to games with him in the car. And he told me stories about a guy called Jimmy Murphy, who was the coach for the Busby Babes. They won the first 5 youth cups. So my dad was always talking about what an influence he'd been. And he was also the guy that filled in for Matt Busby when they had the air crash, and sort of saved the club really by getting the team to Wembley and filling in. And he was so inspiring that even though I wanted to be a player, I always wanted to be a coach as well. So I had that in the background, which is another reason why I went to university's PE and sports science course, to sort of follow up and gain that sort of experience as well, and qualifications. And then it came quicker than I thought it would do. But I was, sort of mid-20s when the manager took me back to United to help on the coaching staff,
We'll dig into that in a little more detail as we progress. Mick, 500 games as a player, long career, and then a coach, started Stockport County, was it?
Yeah, I went and did a little spell back at Norwich initially.
Right, okay.
And then moved from there,
How did that happen? When did you get ideas of becoming a coach? Was it a natural thing, or?
Yeah, all through playing, really. I was interested in how things work and how things operate, and obviously you're selfish as a player because you just want to turn up and play. But then you think a bit deeper about the game, and early on in my playing days, I was surrounded by interesting coaches, good coaches, different coaches, but all probably had an understanding of how they wanted the game to play. And probably I fell in love with it then as how do you become a coach? And certainly my experiences at Man United opened that door a little bit, because we were allowed to mix with the coaches as players. So we would get in early, and there was one or two of us would go into the coach's room and talk about, football in general and what we'd seen the night before, or just how we go about it at our own club as well. But getting to understand the mechanisms of putting things together as a coach. So that got my interest up, and obviously I wanted to carry on playing, and that eventually comes to an end. So you reach that point where you think, well, can I transition? Am I really interested in the game enough to be a teacher? And I followed that up. So I ended up really stumbling into coaching through going back to Norwich as sort of a player coach, but within the realms of the second team, not the main team. And a great bloke who I worked with for numerous years, Gary Megson, gave me that opportunity. He was manager, ex-player at Norwich, manager at Norwich. He asked me if I would be interested in sort of player coaching back there. I took that opportunity, and it was short-lived. It was a bit of reality. But I coached down there with a great coach called Mick Wadsworth, and started to build up this understanding, really. And then obviously it progressed. I moved around a little bit into the lower leagues. I had spells at Stockport County and Blackpool, all great areas to grow in for different reasons. Some not just about football, but about the business of football. And then that took me to more learning and getting in at Manchester United as Sir Alex's reserve team coach at the time.
Just on that learning, there's a formal process to becoming a coach. You get your badges, as they call, your qualifications, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. What does that look like for you, Paul? And how essential is that? What's the sort of formative years of you getting qualified and then becoming a coach?
I think obviously the qualifications necessary. You've actually got to get them to go through and get the jobs to get those through there. You're always learning on courses, but the main bit of your learning is what you do day to day yourself. You might go on a course and get an idea or a process. Having been at the FA recently and been a coach educator, you know that it's very difficult to attach to everybody's learning. Everybody's at a different stage, but if you can give them certain processes that they take away in practice, then that's great. And in terms of my own things, it was more practical, being by the side of my dad, listening to him, going to games, watching games, picking up tips about the game. You know, like I would go watching games with my dad and he'd say things like, we'd be a Stockport County away. Stockport County on a Friday night, we used to go to a lot of games there because everybody else is playing Saturdays. So he'd say things like, oh yeah, they're well on top now, but they're going to concede in a minute. I'd go, well, there's no logic to that. But there was a logic to it because he was seeing them positionally and he was seeing they were going on top, but they were leaving gaps at the back. There was going to be a counter-attack, and he slowly learned the game like that. Yeah. You know, and he'd say number 6 he's going to get booked soon, yellow card, and he would do, because he's seen he's lost his rag, he's had to go to the referee, and now he's tackled someone, and he would make predictions in the game, and you think, well, how does he know all this stuff?
So this learning the game, is this different to playing?
Well, some of it's as you're playing as well, but then there's as you go along coaching. I remember really sort of the start of my sense of excellence at Man United. I remember this is difficult for a coach because it depends on space and so on. You're trying to do certain things. So I had a quarter of the gym, and it was a bit like this actually. The guys there, the wingers there. I'd say it's going the other way. The winger's there, and I'm trying to get a ball to the winger, and trying to get him to turn so that he can do an overlap. But could I get that to work? You know, the guy, he was coming, and he was tight. He couldn't go on the overlap there, and I couldn't get it to work. But I was lucky because that room that Mick's talked about, going in the coach's room, I was in there every day with top coaches and people who made it really simple. So the next day I went to Eric Harrison, and he said to me, I said, what? I couldn't get it to work, Eric. He said, it's a simple principle. He said, you can't go on the overlap unless the guys turn and facing forward. So I've got a way of explaining things now about gaining an advantage in flow. So for that to work, he has to first come off, receive the ball and be facing forward, and now he can play it in his path. Now that, for me, I call that a threshold concept, because it's like a light bulb going off in my brain, and I've never forgotten it because I learnt it. But also it's quite often you're learning this because you made the mistake yourself. You've had to think about it, and then you got the advice. And that's on the job learning as coaching. You've got to put in the hours, you've got to make the mistakes yourself. I think one of the difficult things now, particularly at academy level, is everybody's always surrounded by a team. They've got an analyst there, they've got someone else, an assistant coach. So they're never on their own. And actually being on your own is quite good because you can make a few of these mistakes and then have to figure it out yourself and go through it. Yeah.
It's a really good point, you know, because you do learn in the moment. Yeah. And you do learn a lot of the time if you're open-minded enough to take yourself into an environment that you're not comfortable in. You know, as a player, you're comfortable because you can do it. But when you come outside of that comfort zone and you become a coach, I can take myself back. When I first wanted to be a coach, or I was accepted as a coach, I wasn't a coach. I was learning to be a coach. But what I did do is I observed, I ran through things. You know, we often see coaches on the side of the field, they set out stuff and then they're doing the role, they're doing the move, and there's nobody there. So we're talking ourselves through it. And then you realise, but there's going to be opposition there, and there's going to be... So the challenge is for me, when I went in, I coached players, giving them what players wanted. But I wasn't coaching. I was just repeating what I'd done as a player. Then I became a coach because suddenly I started to think, well, hang on, there's another side to this. I have to give the players something that, not just what they want, but what they need. And then you start to really look at the detail of certain scenarios and certain situations. And that's individually, collectively, in small groups, taking all that to a different level, but really learning yourself how to put that out there. How do you sound? What's your voice like? What's your tone like? What's your body language like? Because when everything else is happening on that field, you've got to be the one who's composed enough to get your message across. And you learn those skills through being out there, repeatedly being out there and doing it, and then analysing yourself a little bit, being a little bit hard on yourself sometimes, because you don't get it right. No coach I know of gets it right all the time. They don't. But what they can do is adapt all the time to different scenarios.
Yeah, and if you're curious, it's like you said about other sports or so on as a player, you learn from other sports and so on. If you're curious about things, and I had really good teachers in a sense of mentors. Jim Ryan was another one. Man United Jim was very good at explaining different things. So I remember him talking about, if we're on here, if you're around the box, and you've got people up front. We used to do an exercise where I'd call it the play around ring, and there might be a defenders there. You've got a play around ring. So we're trying to move the ball around to get it up to the front to play through and so on. And we were looking for combinations. So Jim said, well, play two touch. So control pass, control pass, control pass. And what happens if you do that? The opposition, so it's there, control pass, he gets up. Next one's control pass, he gets up. Next one's control pass. But as he's coming, instead of it being control pass, it's pass, pass, pass. So you change the rhythm. So there's a certain rhythm you get the opposition into, and then you change it. And that might be, so he said it like this, and he used his hands with it. Remember, control pass, boom, boom. Control pass, boom, boom. Control pass, boom, boom. And they went, boom, boom. You change the rhythm. I thought, that's really good. The way he changed the rhythm by describing it was really good, and the way he used his body and his hands, so you just get someone who's really. So then I was at the, I'm not being very often, but to the Halle Orchestra. So I was in the town. We're going in, and when I'm watching, I'm captivated. The music's great, but it's the conductor, and he's, and that is exactly how. Then I say you need to use your arms more as a coach, because you need to be more expressive. And way Jim had done it, boom, boom, boom. And that, you start to pick up little things and you experiment with them. I mean, the manager was brilliant on team talks on certain emphasis of the words.
You've talked
things
about
like
personality before, haven't you? The importance of that and who you are.
Yeah, and some are pretty animated people, coaches, managers are, and players are, but some are pretty quiet and reserved and really are detailed. So it's become specific, and everybody finds a way through practicing who they are and how they deliver and how do they get that message across. I mean, we go on loads of courses in order to get your badge, and one of the usual things that they always say to an ex-player is, don't commentate, you're commentating too much. But that's natural, because you're playing the game as you're coaching it. Then there comes a realisation that too much information can be confusing, so slow down, or pick your words precisely, or stick to topic. So now you're going football talk. When's the right time to step in? When's the right time to let it happen? When's the right time to just go, wow, this is, I've set it all up and it's working brilliantly. Do I change it? Do I keep it going? And these are experiences you have to go with as you start to grow as a coach. And, sometimes coaches, and I say this a lot at grassroots level, most grassroots coaches have an hour at best, maybe an hour less even. And they want to do in an hour a year's work because they're enthusiastic. They want to do it, but just focus on a particular thing and get that out the best you can. And if it doesn't work, do it again next time and just do it again. And then feel comfortable that you've got it, right, cracked it, move on. But don't be in a rush to cram everything into a 1 hour session, because you are really making it more complicated than it needs to be. And Paul mentioned simplicity. Sometimes take a back seat. Yes, you're the guy that's setting up the session. Take a back seat, let it develop and coach the session, and allow players to to experience success and failure during that session, but highlight certain points and then leave it there.
When successful things happen in a game or in a session, is there a point where you sort of stop the game because it's going well and repeat it and praise to try and get more of that, as opposed to perhaps correcting things or trying to develop things?
Depends on what level you're working at, really, and on what level of ability you're working with. A lot of it, coaching can be individual. A lot of it can be verbal rather than actually showing them the practice. But then you've got to use that to get them out there and for them to understand. And Paul also talked about, and we should talk about, space. Space is important to play football in. How do you find it? A lot of times we hear a lot of coaches saying you got to run around, you got to play quick, you got to play 1-2s. Well, that's not necessarily the way to play football. Sometimes standing still is pretty good. You know, one of the greatest players in the world stands still quite a lot, and that's Lionel Messi. But when he gets the ball in that space, he hurts you. You know, so, you know, we can all say pass, move, but what does that really look like? We all passed and moved. Where we're going, what we're trying to achieve. So there has to be a learning process as a coach as to what your objectives are in certain areas of the football field. And all this takes time, and you should coach at different levels. Try coaching at different levels because it's a different experience.
Paul, you touched on it at the start. You went to university, Loughborough. Was it PE?
PE and sports science. That was one of the first sports science courses at the time, yeah.
We've now, even at the high end, people such as Kieran McKenna, who's at Ipswich now, academic background from Loughborough. There was Yao Sacramento, who Jose brought into Tottenham, and I think he went to PSG. What does that academic background give you? Does that give you something more? Is that part of who you are, or do you draw on that to be a good coach?
I think, again, it's very personal. Kieran had actually got a good career at Tottenham. He was moving up, but then got injured, you know. So that was the case with him. And other people, playing is the best lessons I've got were playing in the reserve team at Man United, or like I said before, or previously with Bobby Charlton and so on. But I played with Norman Whiteside, Mark Hughes, Paul McGrath, Stapleton. That's where I learned the most on the field like that. But then it gives you a good fundamental understanding of all parts of coaching by doing the course I did. And again, one of the best coaches I had there was a rugby coach, a guy called Jim Greenwood, who was a British Lion. He'd coached the Japanese national team. He was a really inspirational guy. So I learned a lot from him, was on just the techniques of how to teach a different sport, you know, rugby, and you could apply that to football. But he was an inspirational sort of guy, had the top guys there, Thorpe and Bunker. They were the first into games for understanding, really. So I got a fantastic overall understanding of biomechanics, physiology, all those things would sort of like underpinning a career in football.
The theory is bringing to life the physical and the lived experience.
And the things I love more than the actual. I wasn't so much into the science of but we did experiments there. You knew what the answer was before you did them, you know. But you've got to do it. They had one where you had to get. It was a temperature regulation, right? Temperature regulation to find out, and you had on 3 or 4 tracksuits, hat on, all this. You've got to go, man. This thermometer is like it, not in a place you'd like to have it, mate. Put it that way, right? So I had to go downstairs twice to try and get this thing in the right place, and it's like you're going like mad. You don't go near that lead, whatever you do. You're going like mad on this. You've got to sweat. But I already knew the answer was like you're not going to go above 37, you know, plus or minus a bit. You already knew the answer to that. But what I liked most was the sociology of sport, the comparative sport, where you compare different places and what you can learn from that. And I think that's very much, as well as the scientific, the physiology side, the bit of comparing different cultures in football, different nationalities, different sports. How do you learn from different nations? Definitely that was interesting as well. But I had the most important people, again, was the people I mixed with. Who I was in the room with were top level people. Oh, and the coach, the football coach, the first coach I ever had, they didn't shout from the side. He stood on the bank, guy called Mike Holiday, Doc Holiday. He's like Cesar Menotti. He was like smoking non-stop. He was fantastic. He was just dead calm. At half-time, 2 or 3 points. After the game, 2 or 3 points. He put a list on the board. He said, come and see me half an hour during the week. And I used to do that. And in lots of ways, I based my way of working with players on some of that. Yeah.
On that point, on other sports, Mike, yourself, I remember speaking to you, talking about you watching ice hockey, was it? And you saw some of the concepts that would come out in football.
Yeah, I didn't understand the game, but I got the little movement.
You've spent time with Eddie Jones, haven't you, in rugby? And we went to the NFL. I don't think you'd ever watched that, but the minute we sat down and the players were out, you're starting to work out and actually say that they should be wider or deeper.
Yeah, well, you take your knowledge, as far as you can go, and then you start to look a little bit deeper into, well, what happens in other sports, because certain sports like basketball, ice hockey, things like that, are all quick, rapid movements, maybe final third executions. All it is really, it's getting to that small goal, putting that puck in the back of the net. How do they rotate? How do they move the ball? You can apply that, if you look at the detail of football, into the final third play in football. How are the movements happening? Who's the pivot? Who's not? So you start to think a little bit laterally and a little bit out of the box a little bit as to how that can feed itself into football. And I did quite a bit of that. I got some of it okay, some of it I dismissed, but it was more about how do people combine with people, and rugby is completely different, as to who does what when. Ice hockey's, all about a small-sided game in a way. How do you create a small-sided game in soccer? You can use the principle. Same with basketball. You watch them and who's the goal scorer, who's the main man. How does it all link? So you pick up little bits and then you bring that to the table in your idea of how you want your team or your coaching career to go. And I just started picking up bits of this. And Paul touched on a point there when you went abroad, and I learned a lot playing in Europe. Going and playing in Europe with Man United as a player, but then when I started early on to coach in Europe, and I was seeing things really early on, like, Bayer Leverkusen, Top Moller as the manager, and they were a level which I hadn't seen before as far as performance, and they had what would be called a sweeper then, but then they had a pivot centre midfielder who we would call the four now maybe, or whatever, playing in front of the back four. So in essence, looking at it further down the line, that was the start of maybe a diamond or things like that. And when that sweeper came out from the back, the force stepped back in. So he covered that. And I was still playing then, and I was like thinking, wow, this is different. This is not what you normally get in your league back home, both as a player and as a coach. And then it generates itself then into things like playing away at Deportivo La Coruña and seeing players that suddenly, instead of being a striker, we're starting to talk about forwards. And, one particular who I thought was a striker, as soon as the team lost the ball, he wandered away to the side into space when the right back or the left back was attacking. So he was sort of seeing the game from an attacking position, even though his team were defending. And all these things, you suddenly start to think, wow, there's video now, and you can watch this back and you can analyse it, and you start to create this feeling of, wow, I could set that up. I could set that up, see how that goes, and that might be an addition for the players to bring to their game. And it all comes through observation and communication, and actually it comes through talking the game. Talk football. It's a lost art now, I think, where people of football backgrounds sit in a room and talk football, because we've got laptops, we've got all these sorts of technology that speed things up, get things done. But do we actually generate the talk and then the doing? It's something that, it's in the game, it's good for the game, but right now, get out there, talk it, go and do it, make mistakes, improve.
So just going on from that, from the different sports, here's one thing that I think is really coming into play now because of the change in England, the interpretation of the rules. So before, we would have smashed into each other, six studs up, slide in and just get on with the game. Now it's gone more to the European rules, which I think then opens up the chance to get your body between the ball, and that's becoming a bigger skill. So then I'm looking even on Twitter, there's a lad on there, he's talking about ice hockey. It's exactly the same, big for them. You know, it looks like they're smashing them in the boards. Well, he's got a phrase for it. So you pick up phrases from other sports. So he's got a phrase called position before possession. So I don't know if we can do it now. Have we got a ball here? Have we got a ball?
We can get you a ball.
Where's the ball?
Here we go. Got one here.
So if we've got the ball now, you have the ball. You have the ball. Please stand up, mate. Stand up. We'll put that chair just to the side. So if Mick's the ice hockey guy, now you have the ball. You can have the ball. If Mick goes there, you're in possession
Have we
now.
got this on camera?
Yeah. Can we get it?
Yeah.
Can we slide in? Now, in the old days, if you roll that forward, we might have gone for a 50-50 challenge.
Yeah,
we might have come to here, into there. But what you'd say now is position before possession, and I've just blocked you off. And I get in. Yeah?
And he's in the boards.
And he's in the boards. In ice hockey, it looks like they slide in, and it looks like I've absolutely... But I haven't. All I've done is got possession. He hits the back of me, and he goes there. And with football, the same. He was good at it, Tebes. The South Americans seem to be better, don't they?
Yeah.
So you just now, instead of going towards the ball, you just block off and get here. Obviously, if you're doing it 6 yards away, it's a foul. But as the ball's just coming, that's it. Anyway, have your dentist chair back.
It's true, and those are coaching techniques that you observe first and then you look to practice. But it comes back to the coach's role of breaking these things
just
down
on
into
that,
small
and you mentioned
things.
it earlier as well, where you see a thing and you bring it into practice. Is some of coaching experimental, or you sort of think, let's see what happens here? And is this you and the players in it together?
I think it can be experimental, yeah, because sometimes you have an idea and you want to get that idea across. And sometimes that idea is not perceived in the way that you see it by others, by the players. But what you will get is conversation and feedback from the players that, no, that doesn't work, or that's not possible. This is the way I would see it happening. So you start to adapt and elaborate. It educates you as well. It puts you in their position so that when you take ownership of that through the help of the players, you can actually translate that back to other coaches, that he doesn't do it that way. I mean, it happens in a lot of sports. We all want to be technically correct, and we all want to be, cricket's a great example. There's many cricketers who, they play a straight bat and they go through the technique, and in order to get that shot, you've got to get your feet right.
Sport's not a perfect game, was it?
But then all of a sudden you get a Derek Randall that comes along, which is many years ago, and he's so unorthodox, he just steps across and does the complete opposite of the textbook, but it all works for him. Now, is that right or wrong? But if it works, there's a point to it. And I think people find their way through things just by adapting, but also seeing something, practicing it, and then a coach learns with the group of players as well. It's challenging for a coach, because you can't expect the coach to know everything and shouldn't know everything. But the players are playing the game. The players are the ones that feel it. They're the ones out there that are in the moment. They're in the competition, and how they adapt to opposition, the challenge of winning a game, the challenge against a player or a group of players. We talked about, how coaching in a way in England follows a same process. At one point in your early coaching days, everybody was doing the same thing. Then there's an influx of overseas coaches from all different areas, different cultures, different backgrounds. It suddenly opened up to, traditionally 4-4-2 in England. All of a sudden, overload midfield. Now, that wasn't an English sort of concept. That came through other coaches. Then it became 3 at the back and sweepers and things like that. So, all these things adapt themselves. We've got one coming up now probably, which is heading the ball. That's something that's going to change the way the game's going to play. If that rule comes in where, there's no longer heading in the game of football, well, coaches are going to have to adapt, and players are, to find other ways of winning a game of football, and that's going to be something thought out, and who's going to be the one that brings that concept out. It's going to be quite interesting, but it evolves all the time, and you've got to evolve with it.
Paul, you work with some talented players at youth levels in Manchester United and England setups. when you've got a real talent as a young kid, and a lot of our grassroots viewers will have this, most grassroots team have a best player. How do you work with them? How do you challenge them? How do you take them to another level? How do you keep them on board?
Well, I think you're always coaching to that level anyway. It's better coaching to the top and see if the others can drag themselves up there. You know, you want to challenge the best. I wouldn't be holding them back by sort of going to a lower level. But then it's individual coaching again within the game. You might have certain challenges for them or certain things you want them to do. And if you've got a real talent, a lot of your session might be based around them. But of course, everybody else is always involved. They've all got their own challenges by playing in that. It's the secret for coaching really is knowing what they need next for each player. You'll have general things they need next as a team, but within that, certain things that they particularly need. I spoke to you before about Marcus Rashford. So he was in the beginning of his second year. We were working on balls behind, so a lot of the sessions gave enough space behind that were set up for that to happen, for him to practice it. But that also meant the centre half has to practice that by defending against that. The goalkeeper's got to be ready off his line. Everybody's got to look for those passes. It's not just who you're working on, but you've obviously pinpointed that's an area you want to go after. Yeah.
We now, in the modern game in particular, we now have a world where, recent news, clubs are actually signing individual coaches off other players in this world of sort of positional coaching, unit coaching, performance analysis. How does the wider support system fit into the modern game, and how important is it to you as a coach?
It's massive now. I mean, there's more staff now at a football club than ever, and they've all got specific roles to do, but they all want to justify their positions as well. So they all have exposure to the players a lot now, at certain moments in a training session. But as a coach or a head coach, whatever you want to call it, you have to bring that together to make it useful enough so that it's not too complicated. It's pretty simple in a way that a player understands, and how much time is on grass and how much time is inside and how much time is analysis and how much time is with the sports science guys, and making sure that all that works in the grand scheme of things, which is to produce a winning formula, a winning team. And a lot of it has changed from, we moved into position specific training, so that's based on what elements are involved in that. So you have to understand there's a bit of sports science in there, because if you're a forward or a centre forward or you're a fullback, your training now has to consist of certain concepts in that training that allow you to play the role you play in. But within that, you've still got to combine all that as a coach to make it effective as a team. So you're forever thinking of a lot of things, but you're using a lot more people to get that message across now. And that's in the game now. That's there. Technology's massive. Technology's huge, and players want to use technology. They want to see how that technology improves them. Now sometimes you can be a coach that just wants to see it, but other people want it to be data. It's got to be data based and all that, and that's all part of the game. But it's important for me ultimately as a coach. I want to see them out on the grass. I want to see them out there practicing, playing and training, and the other bits are the add-on for me. They're the add-on to what fundamentally is the game of football.
Paul, when you went into Manchester United, what's the remit? What is the sort of an ultimate goal for you? Did the manager at the time sort of say, this is what I want from you, this is where I need you to get them to?
No. No, it's pretty straightforward. You've got to try and get them in the first team, and if they're not in the first team, then can they be sold? Which we sold a lot of players, and if not, can they get a good career in football? Can we make sure they got a good education, they're well brought up, that they get other jobs? That's straightforward, really. But yeah, they were trying to get them in the first team, and because it was happening, there was a lot of belief behind that. At that point, just talking about multidisciplinary teams and so on, there wasn't so much of that. So you're doing that more on your own, then slowly it built up. I think there's still there's in academies and so on now. There's a lot of these positions, but because it's been brought in, if you're not careful, it's seen as separate, multidisciplinary, which to me says we've got multiple of them. Whereas interdisciplinary, it makes it we're combined. Now that's difficult when you've done your sports science degree and that's what you're good at. You're not a player, you've not looked at that before, and the same, you're a coach, you've not looked into that, and so to me there needs to be a way, and there's one of the things I did at the FA. Called it Under the Microscope. It's an observational tool to look at the players, the way they play, the way they move, but on the pitch, so that everybody looks through the same lens. Because what you get is when somebody's looking through the lens here, he can push such a weight, he can do this amount of high-speed running, they can do this amount of distance run. But you've got to see, can he rearrange his body in that moment to score that goal, to beat his opposition? Is it the right timing? And so on. So I think you've got to get everybody looking through the same lens. Otherwise, they can be almost fighting against each other. It's got to be so that, I like the idea, if they all look through the same lens, Mick can teach me, you can teach me from a psychological point of view. We can all teach each other, and they call it better collective intelligence. Instead of it being different bias, you've brought everybody's bias together, but you've educated each other, and you've all got better. That, to me, is the next step for a really high-class interdisciplinary team. And one of the things I did if you're the psychologist, you've not done as much football as Mick. And if you're the weights guy who's not, you have to say, well, yeah, but how does those weights equate to holding the guy off like we just did before? How's that going to, he's got to step in front. How do we do that? And it's all mixed. So I would want my fitness guy on the pitch with me, saying, well, like, how do you open up? How do you open your hips up? How do you move? How do you use your body? And to do that, you've got to look through the same lens. And that the lens I put was positioning, not on the pitch like right wing, inside right. No, positioning versus your opponent. Do you step in front? You run behind. Body orientation, am I facing forward, sideways, so on. Scanning, how do you look? When do you look? How often do you look? And then movements, speed of movement, change direction, deception, timing, techniques, all of that. I think you need to have that mix. Otherwise, you're basically a weightlifting coach who's working in football. You need to know weightlifting for football, because it's totally different.
That's true. It's a big area, and it's a lot of expertise in there, but it has to be coordinated well enough for the player, and ultimately for the team. And then by having the team around the team, which is massively important, they're all singing from the same song sheet, and they're all trying to push in the direction you want to go in, which is to win and ultimately be champions. And then there's that's a standard then you've set, and that's a program you can follow because it's successful. And then you adapt it as you go along, because different ideas come into different areas of expertise, or different personnel come in to challenge it. But you've got to be open-minded enough to say, fundamentally we've got what we've got, because our team works really well together to produce the best team on the field. And ultimately, we tinker with it every now and again. And that's important, because you've got to freshen it up, create new energy. And that's on and off the field. That's staff as well as players. And it's all about what you bring to the table. What do you bring to the table, and who puts that together?
As well, it's got to be as well with all that team. You can say, well, we do this. This is our method. This is the way I do it. But it all depends on context of that particular player. Because I remember Vidic, Emmanuel Vidic was, with John Terry, the best defender of the box, the best defender. He won the Player of the Year, didn't he, and everything. He was a fantastic player. And I remember him coming back from injury, and he was doing a heading practice with Warren Joyce, the reserve coach. So the practice basically was Warren would throw a ball from there. This might be the goal. He'd throw the ball, and he'd have to run and head it away there. But then he'd have to turn his body, run and jump, head it away there. Then he'd come back. Yeah. So he did it fine. Then he come to this side. He came to this side, and Warren throws it, he heads it, and he runs, and he turns his back on the thing and heads it like that. And Warren says, no, you've got to keep your back to the goal.
Yeah, always orientate to the ball.
And he went, yeah, but I only jump off this foot. And that's the way I've always done it. and he's the best in the world of doing it. So you've got to know there's a context, and there's always sometimes a reason, and you've got to bend with the player.
Well, it's like Maradona's a scenario. You look at Maradona and everybody talks about the greatest, and they're all going, well, he can't use his right foot, but he had the best left foot in the business, and he's the world's best. So you're getting into coaching concepts there of, why do I want to spend all my time trying to work his right foot when he's got a wand of a left foot? Yeah. So just make sure all your technique is through his left side or his left foot and what have you. And he had the rest. I mean, he's a bit, but those are the types of things coaches analyse, see, and then if you've got the facility that we're talking about of other individual people around you who can give them a little bit more to enhance what they've already got, you're on a winner.
One thing I want to touch on is the use of video and video analysis. We now live in a world where social media content, YouTube, we know that children spend hours and hours online. It's prevalent in football. We watch every game. There's Monday Night Football. Gary and Jamie will break it down. They'll show you what's good, what's bad. It's used in recruitment, but it's everywhere. You can't hide anything. What's good practice in terms of using video in the coaching process? And probably yourself, Mick, how did you use video in preparation for games when you've got a game every 3-4 days at the highest level?
Well, video and technology now is massive for all different facets of the game, you know, but you use it from an individual point of view. You use it from a group point of view and a collective team point of view. There's different moments to use it. And we talk about multi-sport and the different sports.
The players hungry for it?
They're definitely hungry for it. They want to see, well, first of all, they want to see themselves. Then they want to see, you know, what is themselves in relation to the partner or the players around them. Then they want to see what's the relationship with the team. So you have to find ways. And as a coach now, you're not necessarily the guy that watches all the football anymore, because you've got things to do and you're moving on and the games are coming thick and fast. So you're always in that sort of zone of the next game.
That for you?
So you have people around you now who are your eyes and your ears, and they are relating you to what they see, and they see more football probably than you can. So in an ideal world, you want bits of, just like the kids want bits of, but you want the moments that you can feed back to the players, and you get relationships with players. So you start to understand what are they asking for? You know, what do they need? What are they asking for? And then also having the skill as to how are you going to bring that to the table? Because is it constructive? Yes. But it could also have a negative effect in the way you present it. It can have a positive effect as well. But how do they feel being on a one-on-one with you when they think as though they know everything, they've done everything correct, and then you show them something and it's, whoa, I didn't realise that, you know? And that happens a lot. But once you get into that groove of delivering that sort of analysis, the players really absorb that, and they do want more of that now.
Not
only just
problems.
stats, but they want, they can talk through it, but what you do as a coach, you get to understand the player as well. You get to understand what he's thinking and why that might happen. And it's an interesting thing to actually sit with the player.
Open up wider dialogue and more.
Yeah, it can open up confusion if it's delivered in the wrong way, because you're actually trying to sort of put your message across to them, but they're actually the ones that have got to work it out. They've got to find a way through it. And sometimes you can not just call on what they're experiencing. Analysis now gives you the opportunity to show them what's going on, what's out there. So you can actually relay things back to them that is actually happening, and they're just not quite there, but depends at what development stage they are. There's no point showing, Ronaldo what Messi does, because he's Ronaldo. But you can actually find things that can relate to Ronaldo through other people, on a positive note.
As Mick said, there's different ways of doing it. There's different stages of the week. You'll do different things.
Correct, yeah.
There'll be development type of thing, or there'll be some for performance. One of the things you've got to be careful is not to do too much, because basically, as you know, psychologists, cognitive brain, working brain basically can't take it all in. To give them too much before training or any meeting, there's been some managers, even at United, they had too many meetings, they were too long. So if you go past 15 minutes on a meeting, you're starting to maybe not get everybody. And you've got to build up the best way. The best way I've seen it done is in rugby league, where the players have almost in control by the end of the week. By the end of the week, Tony Smith's the best. Well, he's one of the best I've seen.
Players are in control of the analysis themselves.
Well, of the team talk and so on before the game. So Tony Smith was at Warrington. I saw him first at Leeds. He's very, very accommodating. Lets you come in and see everything. So he wasn't even in the room, and he's the head coach. He was sort of half in the room, half not in the room with a cup of tea. And I'm watching. The assistant coach started it off. Right, this is that, the opposition this, what should we do here, what happened next? Or, he starts off with this. But before you knew it, the players were taking charge of it. Now, then I think you're on a good track, because the players are now
getting ownership of
they're getting ownership. They're sort of not calling each other out, or they put their hands up to what's happening and so on. But obviously that's it's over time. You can't do that if you don't know what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So as with young players, you've got to educate them into those things. And that's that's an ongoing process.
I saw that at Sale Sharks when I was invited in, and recently, really, it's not, and that was one of my first experiences of it outside of international rugby. Yeah. And again, not familiar with the rules of rugby, but the concepts they had in place and how they address certain issues was fascinating for me, because it is individual, but it's also collective. And people take ownership of it. So they have leaders within those groups. But not only do they have leaders, they have the up-and-coming youngsters tucked into that group who probably are, vulnerable in a way as they don't want to speak because they've got international players in that group. But you can see them absorbing all information, tactically, technically, what they need to do in that day, in that performance. And it's all shaped around... they know the game, or they know a lot of the game.
So technology is facilitating that togetherness and the communication.
And they will put, I saw it firsthand, they put clips together themselves on their group. This is what we're not good at, and this is what we're really good at. And we need to bring this is our A game. And they'll show these things amongst each other, and then it all gets combined into one address. This is the game plan. This is how we're going to affect the game. This is who we are on this one day, on this game. We need to do this. And they go for it, but they're all. It's quite a learning process throughout the week to get to the point.
That's very high level of understanding. When you're talking about development, a lot of the kids and so on, you have to be very careful not to give them too much information. When I collect loads of little quotes on top coaches in different sports, and Sir Alex was one. He said, I never used to go in the dressing room before the game, and this is true because we lived it. He said, reminding players what they needed to do. He said, I wanted them to have the confidence that I thought I was confident in them. Whereas you go in so many dressing rooms and there's so much talk before the game. Don't forget to do this. Don't forget the centre forward. Don't forget him. Don't forget it. And it just it's going, you can't take it all in. And I'm sure it just adds to the pressure. Whereas, be confident in what you're doing can be one thing. And particularly I've seen it academy level, youth level, 2 coaches in the dressing room, both speak for 5 minutes. They go out on the side before the game, 5 minutes. Then they have a break. First third, 5 minutes each. Second third. How many pieces of information in one go? So I talk about the guy at Loughborough I had is so succinct in getting it everywhere. And I think that's, you've got to understand that cognitive overload is a massive thing, trying to take it on board while you're in the middle of a game. And then the coach thinks, just because you said, right, have we all got that? What did I say? Just because he's repeated it back doesn't mean he's understood it and he can do it on the pitch, An
absolute wealth of information there. And this will be a topic that we'll dig into deeper and deeper. There'll be more episodes on coaching. In less than 10 seconds, one tip for being a top coach. Just get on there and do it. Just get involved in the actual workings and the mechanisms that create a coaching environment.
Just like I've just said there, it was a quote from, it was on a pro license course. He was on talking on it. Klopp, have clarity. Don't overwhelm the players. Don't overwhelm the players. Be
Simplicity is a good word as well.
Excellent. Great discussion. And as I say, there will be much, much more on this particular topic. Thanks again to Burnley Football Club in the community and Burnley Football Club for letting us use their facilities.